Hi, friends. Welcome to Bar of the Conference. I'm your host, Derek Scott III. Today's episode is with Shandon Klein. Shandon is a General Conference lay delegate in the North Texas Conference. She's a certified candidate for ministry, and she's also pursuing a doctoral degree in religious ethics. She and her husband, Shane, have 2 dogs and a cat. Now, you'll hear me say this in the episode, and it is just my opinion, but I believe Shandon is one of the faces that represents the future of the United Methodist Church. I loved listening to her story of stumbling into the UMC, discovering her call to ministry, and finding her place in the shaping of our denomination. I was inspired by her passion for the church. And in all of it, I feel like she represents, yes, the church that is today, but also the church that we are becoming for tomorrow. So, you know what I always say, grab a notebook and a choice beverage, because you're going to be inspired by the wonderful Shandon Klein. Shandon, I got to thank you for joining me on the podcast. Primarily because you're great, and I'm just so excited that you're here, but also the amount of time that it's been since I asked you to be on the podcast and this actual interview. It's just a few hours. So I'm really, really grateful that you said yes and we're ready to jump right in and just get in the Bar of the Conference vibe. So really, really grateful that you're here. You and I met, I think it was the briefing?
I feel like it was. Yes, I think it was Nashville.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And we get to do a ton of talking because there was a lot of talking happening around us. But I remember meeting you there, and then somehow we just kept bumping into each other in these different spaces, which is weird because right after that was COVID. But we kept bumping into each other somehow. And I just have found you to be a dynamic human being with so much spirit. And I often think about the future of our church, and this is weird, and I'm going to ask you this question later, but I often think about the future of our church, and you're one of the faces that comes up first.
Oh, wow. That means so much.
Well, and it's not to say that you're not leading right now, which you are, and that's some of the stuff we're going to talk about, but I think about where we're headed, and you're one of those faces. So really, really grateful you're here.
Oh, wow.
And want to just take this opportunity to hear kind of how you got into United Methodism, because that's just stuff that I've never known.
Yeah.
So you're in North Texas Conference, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What city are you serving in right now?
I'm serving in Richardson. So I'm at First UMC Richardson right now, and that's where I'm on staff right now.
Yeah. But as a layperson,
now. Yeah, I'm like, I went to seminary, so I'm all done with that. It's just, I'm a lay person right now. So I'm in that in between, not in between to where I have like a pastor license. Nope, I don't have that, because then I wouldn't be lay, you know?
That's right.
But yes, I preach every now and then, so I still do that. So well, it's a mix.
On behalf of the laity, we are grateful to hold on to you for a few more years.
Oh,
very grateful. But tell me, how did God's prevenient grace lead you into the United Methodist Church?
Oh, Derek, that in itself is a really interesting story. So I grew up Episcopalian. And so I grew up like in the church, like just, smells and bells, right? Like very traditional, crossing ourselves, like really, really tiny church in Charleston, South Carolina. That was, a main staple in my life, went to church every Sunday, went to Sunday school, came back, pretty much memorized the Book of Common Prayer because we said the same things every single Sunday. But I'll say when I went into college, and like I moved away for college, I didn't really the way that the theology worked was like God's up there, and as long as I'm a good person, like, I come to God for the things that I need, like God comes through and provides the things that we need when we're in trouble, like they're ever present help, that type of thing or whatever. But I didn't really necessarily think of a God with me. I just was like, oh, just be a good person. Cool. I can do that. I don't need to go to church to do that. So I didn't. But it wasn't until my granddad became really ill with cancer. And I just started feeling that hole in my heart. Like I needed that space to be able to connect some way, spiritually, religiously. I'm like, well, maybe like I just need to get back to church because I wasn't, in my hometown when I was in college. So it's like I think that it was kind of that way to still connect to home, so to speak,
Yeah.
So I went church shopping, and I was like, well, if I get to go and church shop, I might as well find something that fits my schedule. And so I was looking for the churches that were meeting at night on Sunday. Like I was like, I'm not trying to get up.
That college life, I get it.
And so like, and I honestly, I at this point I was done with college. I, graduated my undergrad, came down to Texas, and we're just looking for churches, right? And came across a few different options, played around with different options. One of the things that was really important for me was to find an inclusive church to be a part of. I didn't necessarily need there to be like rainbows all over walls or anything like that, but I wanted it to be a space that if my mom were to come in, that she would feel welcome, and that like, and not have like a side eye at her, so it's but that was a big piece that I was looking for. And so like I had, searched different names that are like open and affirming and things like that. I'm like, okay, well, let's just look at these different things. And I remember when I had first come to First Richardson, I remember seeing the Methodist thing is like open hearts. It's like open hearts, open doors,
open hearts, open minds, open doors.
That's right. Open hearts, open minds, open doors. I was like, oh, that sounds nice. Yeah, that's cool. It's meeting at I think it was like 5:00 on Sundays, and we were kind of interested in like contemporary worship, and we're like, all right, go ahead and try it out. So went in. This was relatively close to like when my my granddad was really declining. And I just remember, like, of course, just the warmness of everybody there, but just that like people really wanted to get to know me, that I didn't really feel like a number in their space. It was a small number of people. But me, I absolutely adore music. Music is like a thing for me. Very, very picky about my music. But when I went in the space and everything started, like, it was the first time I actually felt the Holy Spirit.
Wow.
In church before. Like, I didn't know what that felt like. Like, it was just, I found myself like weeping and like actually listening to the words and having them like affect me in like this just profound way. the only way that I can explain it is just feeling like the Holy Spirit like, for the first time, which was pretty insane. But I remember the pastor that was there, like would be was talking and oh, we'd love to see you again, and really super nice, of course, asked me what my name was, that. And so I'm like, yeah, I really enjoyed that, and the music was amazing, and so I'm like, yeah, let's go there again. And when I went there again, like both the person who was welcoming and the pastor, they remembered me by name. Like, oh, right. Hey, Shandon, it's so great to see. I'm like, wait a minute. Like, like you remember my like actual name? When you go to a church, usually they're like, oh, hey, girl. Like, I don't know your name. But like really like the first time back, and there was like some space in between, right? And they were like, oh yeah, I remember you were studying for the MCAT and everything, right? How's that going? Like they remembered, the pastor themselves remembered those little things about me when we were just talking, and like and I'd never really experienced that before. Of course, when you grow up in a church, like everybody knows you anyway, right? So but here, like, even when I was church shopping, like I didn't have like something that felt that intimate and close to where I'm like, oh, this person actually like cares about my welfare outside of this space and all of this. And so so that drew me in. And there was this sermon that he did that talked about like it was actually just one of those throwaway sentences, right? Like he was talking about a certain book of the Bible, and he's just like, you know what, like don't take my word for it, but actually you should read this chapter like in your leisure, like on your own, and see if see what you get from it. And that was the first time I had ever heard a preacher actually even talk about us as like people in the congregation going to read and like interpret the Bible ourselves. Like I was used to, okay, we listen to the sermon, and they, like whatever the sermon the priest is saying is how it's supposed to be interpreted. Like I didn't have any role in that, right? I'm like, wait, I can have a role in that? What does this look like?
Yeah.
This is cool. And especially for my scientific brain, my background is in the sciences, and I love analysis and all of that. I'm like, wait, like we can do that with the Bible? That's like cool. So I started to learn at least a little bit about, this tradition that I had just happened to walk into. And I was not looking for any specific denomination. I just saw a church. I'm like, oh, cool, it's a church. Let's see if they're gonna say something that hits me. But I ran into Methodism that way, and I'm so grateful for it. I haven't looked back since. Wow. That quadrilateral's got me for sure.
Wow, Shandon, I was like journeying with you as you're like walking in, and just that first like downbeat just like hitting you, and
there's that downbeat. I'm like,
it's always the downbeat. Wow. And I think it's profound, because I do think I think that's the experience of many people when they are at a very specific place in their lives, and God meets them in a space, in a room with a group of people. But I think it's also important because sometimes, because the United Methodist Church has been around for a minute, we forget, or we wonder, is that still happening?
Oh, it's happening.
right?
Oh,
Like it's
yes.
happening. And
Oh, it's happening.
just in my little local church here in Jacksonville, Florida, it happened this morning for someone. And
Mm.
that and just so it's just beautiful to hear that it's still happening. It is
Oh,
still
yes.
happening. So clearly you roll into this United Methodist Church
Knowing
and
nothing.
and
Knowing nothing about a United what it meant
but
at
you
all.
get drawn into this thing
Mhm.
and somehow that leads and you come in as a college student. So, right?
Yeah, like I had just finished my undergrad and I was going
Yeah.
into my master's, my first master's.
Wow. So take us, maybe just a straight shot, because I'm sure that there's
Yeah.
many stops along the way. But take us to call to ministry and
Oh,
recognizing that you've got a. It's not just I get to actually read the Bible for myself, but I actually get to be a part of this. How did you? What was
ooh.
that call?
Yeah, that's funnier. Um, so one of the this is kind of another journeying piece. So my granddad passes away. In the midst of that, I was connected to Stephen Ministry. And for those who don't know
Yeah.
what Stephen Ministry is, it's kind of a lay led, honestly, lay led ministers who really walk you through grief and like kind of those accessible things of having that Christian, um, I'd say like that Christian person to help walk you through those grief stricken times in your life. There is like kind of
Yeah.
those crisis moments
Yeah.
that are in your life that don't necessitate like a doctor or things like that. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's a very, very helpful for pastors, especially when there's a lot of people in the congregation, right?
Right.
But you're usually matched with somebody who's gone through something similar. And it was this older woman, and like I was just so blown away of how just her mere presence was just like the light of Christ, like and all she was doing, she was just listening and being there. She's the best prayer ever. I was like, how do you do this, and just I'm like that'd be kind of cool to be that for somebody, like, just in general, just to do that. I didn't think anything of it. My main goal was to try and become the pediatric heart surgeon thing. Like that's what I was, trying to get into. um so at the time I was, there as a congregant at First Richardson, and I was in a position that just had a boss that was really emotionally abusive. And I ended up um, just like in the car crying out to God, just being like, is this what you want for me? Or is there something else um, that you're wanting me to do? And it was for the first time I listened back for an answer. you know, um,
Hmm.
it was like the way I usually talked with God, it was really one sided.
Yeah.
I never really necessarily listened back. Um, and I just heard, when I say heard, I like kind of like felt in my spirit, kind of had these thoughts that didn't really seem like they were from myself, of just like, no, I don't want this for you.
Hmm.
And I called Shane on the phone. I'm sure Shane remembers the call,
Hmm.
like on my lunch break. Just
And
being like,
Shane is your
Shane is my husband.
husband. Yes.
Sorry.
Yes. Just
Yes.
want to make sure
Shane is
we're
my
all.
husband.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Shane's my husband. And I was just like, babe, like I don't think I'm called to, like, or not called to this. I was just like, I don't think that God wants me to be in this situation right now, and like with this job. And Shane, bless his heart, he's just like, you know what? Hey, I'm here to support you. And whatever you decide, I'm here for you. Like whatever you need. And, hung up with him, I'm in tears and all of that. And I'm just like, all right, God, I am going to step out on faith and trust that this is you. And I did something that was completely out of my character. I walked into that boss's office and said that this is going to be my last day. I didn't have a backup. I just was like, I'm just going on God and seeing what happens. So I was like, all right, I'm just going to look for some part-time jobs in the meantime, go and do that. And my pastor, who I had gotten really close with, it was actually 6 months later from when I did that, says, hey, we have this position that's coming up at the church for assistant director of welcoming. That's coming up. It's a part-time position. I know that you've been looking for part-time positions. Is it something that you might be interested in applying for? And I'm just like, sure, and I would know the person who was my boss, and I'm like, well, that'd be cool, at least it'd be, at church alike. I'm like, hey, I could do that. And he's like, I think you'd be great. I'm like, oh, all right, I'll apply. And by the grace of God, I ended up getting it. Oh, Derek, I tell you, day 1/day 2, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the most fulfilling thing I have ever done in my entire life.
I bet. Wow.
And then I was like, oh, this is the most fulfilling thing that I've ever done in my entire life. What does that mean? Right?
Yeah.
Because for over 15 years, I had this specific thing in mind of how I was going to serve God. I was going to be a pediatric heart surgeon. I was going to go and help kids with their hearts, just like one helped mine. And so this was a wrench in things, right? So moving forward with that, there were, I ended up helping out with the Modern Worship Ministry, helping them on their worship team, helping them to kind of go over some rebranding type of things. And we got to where we were doing opening day on the new space for modern worship at our church, which was just an amazing thing. It was amazing. We had a kind of a core group of 70 people within our church, and we were able to be in the space on that Wednesday night before, and just to be in the space and pray over one another. And the next Sunday when we welcomed, there were 427 people who showed up in the space for opening day. And I'm getting teary remembering it. And geez, the Holy Spirit was just so thick, so incredibly thick. I'm just like, wow. I don't know what this is, but I need to be a part of this, right? I didn't really know what that was. But in the series, my pastor talked about his call to ministry. And ironically, he too was in a scientific industry and ended up getting the call to ministry, and said that it was the most fulfilling thing he had ever done in his entire life. And I was just like, oh, maybe that might be what God's kind of chipping on me with. And so through talking with him and talking with the other co-pastor there, who broke me in their sermon that are you a fan or are you a follower of Jesus? I was like, yep, that broke me. And I was just like, Jilly, like, we're gonna need to talk because I think I have a call to ministry.
I think I have a call to ministry.
I think I have a call to ministry. It was like it was just kind of like, like, are you a fan? Just going up, but like, or are you willing to go through the trials that Jesus did, that Jesus walked?
Yeah.
Like, I doing this ministry thing, especially the ordained ministry route, like, it is way easier to be a scientist or a surgeon than it is to do ministry. Like, way easier. Way easier. Like there's everything's so prescribed or whatever, but like when you're dealing with people's like soul, like their will to live, their hope, like those are heavy things, right?
Yeah.
Like it scares crap out of me, still does. And that's just something that I walked into. Shane was like, when I was breaking it to Shane, my sweet husband, like, and he asked me all the right questions, right? Like, they're just like, do you like, is it a fear of failure with, being a doctor? And I was just like, no, it's not that. And like, he asked me this really poignant question, as he always says. He was like, well, what happens if you go through this and 10 years from now, you're like, man, I should have been a doctor. And I'm just like, in my head, I was like, no, like, when you say that, I think of it the other way around. I feel like if I didn't do it, I'd be like, man, I should have done ministry. And that was the first time I had ever in my life defended against being a doctor, which ironically I end up doing it anyway, because I'm getting my doctorate in religious ethics. Just not that kind of doctor.
It's not that kind of doctor,
but it's still a doctor. So yeah.
Well, again, you still, I'm tracking with you every step of the way here. So again, I met you at a general conference briefing in 2020, right?
Yep.
So, and if I'm correct, if we had general conference 2020, that would have been your first time in the general conference space. Would that have been your first time?
Yes.
It was general conference. I'm sorry, it was jurisdictional conference this past November. Your first jurisdictional conference?
Yes.
Okay, so then were you in the room at General Conference 2019, or were you at home?
No, I was actually in seminary watching, like, with our watch party from our space that we have. Like one of the break spaces, basically. And I was watching, like we were all waiting for the vote, and it was on live stream.
So I'm curious, when you saw that the traditional plan had passed, what was the feeling in the room?
Well, number one, there weren't that many people in the room because, everybody was doing their certain classes and all of that. But for the people who were in the room, there was kind of this shock in the room, kind of solemn. But it was one of those things. So I'll tell you this, Derek, like, when we were trying to, like, when I was learning about all the things that were happening, I didn't really know that much about General Conference at that point, because I had just started to really learn about Methodism and its mechanisms, polity-wise, maybe about a year before. And especially with, the specific thing of the different plans that were going about, right? And one thing that I was saying, I'm like, given, like, I have queer family members, I'm like, I need to figure out whether I'm going to stay in the United Methodist Church or not.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm gonna see based off of, what I see at General Conference, whether I'd still feel called to that.
Mm-hmm.
However, the responses afterward that we saw, like the impassioned pleas, like the fire that I saw, like in each person that was coming up, like the fight for the minority report to be put forward. It was those sparks that I saw. I was like, oh no, there's something still there.
Mm-hmm.
There is, I just felt this shift of like, oh, there's some Holy Spirit moment happening. Like there's some chains breaking right now. Like they may, like y'all may not have felt that or seen that. I'm like, but I visibly felt, I'm like, oh, there's something about to go down. Like, I'm like, I mean, while it was very, like, I mean, yes, I was very solemn for that. I was like, this is ridiculous. But like, I had so much hope based off of the fervor and the reaction to it.
Yeah.
From those who were coming up to the podium still. And I'm like, I at that point, I was just like, if I leave the UMC, what church am I leaving? You know what I'm saying? Like, if there aren't people to fight for it, then how is that going to impact other people?
Right.
I believed in, like, in terms of the polity, I think that we have such a great opportunity to really be that tangible global church that's connectional. Like, we have so much possibility there. But I'm like, if there are people like me, like them, that were to leave the church and not fight, I feel like I would be doing more harm.
Wow.
So, and I remember that in that specific moment. And I was just like, I can stay in here because there are people like that who are still fighting. And I felt good. I felt good with that. But y'all were incredibly inspiring, to, at least I can just say for myself. Like, I was just like, yeah. I'm like, I don't think that they're ready for us young folk through here. I'm like, oh,
but we're coming.
I'm like, oh, I don't think they're ready. Like, because I'm like, I'm like, there was, like, and it was, honestly, it was from all kinds. Like, it wasn't just from the young people. Like, it was from all kinds of different angles. Like, which was beautiful to see, of like the defense of that. But yeah, I truly felt, I'm like, if that spark is still there, then there is still fight for the United Methodist Church.
Shandon, there's so many things that I want to keep talking about. What I want to push us forward. A lot happened after annual conference season 2019. A lot happened. We had a protocol, and then COVID, and then postponed, and then postponed, and then postponed, and then launch of the UMC. And then we're going to do jurisdictional conference before we get to general conference. And it's your first jurisdictional conference, right?
Yay!
Yeah. Okay. And so I'm just telling you what it was like over in SCJ world to be in the middle of SCJ stuff and to find out that SCJ in the first ballot,
yes, Lord,
elects all three of their Episcopal leaders.
Oh, yes.
Okay. Tell me what I did not know about, because I wasn't in the room. Tell me.
Oh, Derek. So there was a lot of work behind the scenes of making that happen, especially in terms of, I would say, a cross-jurisdictional effort to ensure, like, just kind of that meeting of the minds type of thing, of being able to share back and forth on our ideas for Episcopal candidacy. And I just remember being in, like, say, the strategy room, so to speak, and looking around and being like, I think we've got the votes to get this done. Like, I think we got the votes. And it was just like, all right, we're just sticking to our plan. Like, I was like, if, obviously vote your conscience. Like that's the way that, especially with our North Texas conference, we vote our conscience no matter what. Like, we don't vote as a block. We vote our conscience. However, being in the room when we're we're going to put our little votes in.
Yeah.
And just, sitting there waiting to see what comes up. And then hearing, and we have 3 elections. Like, the explosive, surprise / exclamation / joyfulness, glory sound that exclaimed from our mouths. Like, like that, literally. And we saw the post of the 3 bishops, our first Indigenous bishop ever in the United Methodist Church, our first Black female bishop, and another female bishop, all of them, just representing the complete diversity of our church, all 3 of them elected first ballot. Like, Derek, we broke out in doxology. Right? We all started spontaneously singing "Praise God from whom all blessings flow" in all of the church kid harmonies in all parts. Okay,
wow. And I'm feeling this as you're talking about it.
I have to say, it was one of the most holy experiences I've ever experienced in my life. Wow. I'm about to weep right now. Like, all of us were weeping. I looked over at my senior pastor, Clayton, who's also the head of delegation, and his, you can see there were tears in his oh no, Clayton wasn't in the room. That's right. He said that he's in the Episcopacy committee. So no, but it was real quick, in and out. But it was, I looked at everybody and we're all embracing one another. I know that we've got video of each other being like, yeah, we did it. And I just remember, I'm like, see, this is what it's like when you do holy conferencing. This is holy conferencing. This is what it means to do. And if South Central jurisdiction can do it, then anybody can do it.
We've got some hope. We've got some hope.
So you talk about hope for the church.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's just seeing the fruits of collaborative labor across jurisdictions without being in silos. That's what we saw as a result. Being able to be of one accord for episcopacy. I feel like that's really how it happened. And it was an amazing experience. Yeah. And we're all the newbies are like, oh, that's all we gotta
Well, y'all did a little bit more. Y'all did a little bit.
We did.
There was a little bit more. Yeah, I mean, that was. I mean, the reports that we were getting, it did sound like a very miraculous
It was.
moment.
It absolutely was.
But like the rest of us, you also had some resolutions.
We did.
And so I'd love to hear a little more of what it was like presenting those resolutions, and just what was the discernment and the conferencing around that.
Sure. So yeah, there were 3 resolutions that were presented. One that was kind of a call to integrity. And that was actually, we were trying to figure out in our strategy team who would be the person to bring it forth. And I guess I was, I was asked like, oh, could you do it?
I guess they saw something. I guess they saw someone. I guess they saw someone. Yeah.
Well, so yeah, I'm like, y'all, I've never done this before, but okay, we'll go and do this. But I mean, the thing is that it is something that I was really passionate about, and so I was willing to do that and go ahead and bring forward the resolution. And quite honestly, it's, the resolution's super simple. It's just like the people who are making decisions about the United Methodist Church and its future need to be made by individuals who are committed to the United Methodist Church. It's pretty simple. It wasn't about, it being a progressive or centrist or traditional issue. It's about your heart. It's a heart issue on whether your heart and your actions and your ethics are still with the United Methodist Church, or if it's already halfway out the door, because this affects both lives and livelihoods. It's not about just property or things like that. So if people were still in discernment on whether they wanted to be a part of this denomination or not, what the resolution was basically saying is to recuse yourself, from those positions that affect things that have to do with the United Methodist Church, including, local church, district, conference, jurisdictional, general church, committees, boards, agencies, delegations, Episcopal leadership, all of the above, right?
Right.
It's all about, that wholeness and healing relationships. And I mean, overwhelmingly passed. All of them overwhelmingly passed, which was a shock. I could tell you with the other one was essentially for that. I believe it was the U.S. jurisdictional
U.S.
regional conference. That's right. Yeah, U.S. regional conference. Obviously that passed easy, but the last one, the queer resolution that called to basically uplift the queer delegates. Surprisingly, there was nobody who came up to the podium to give a no.
Interesting.
There was no one. No one came up.
No speeches.
No, there were no speeches. Yeah.
Now, I know, though, that there was a call for a ruling of law on the queer delegates.
Yes, it was. Yes, there was. And that, specifically, that call to the to give it forward to the Judicial Council, my heart went out to that person because I could hear in her voice that she felt like the bad guy. I remember her coming up and saying, I know that y'all won't believe me, I know that y'all won't believe me that I love my brothers and sisters. I know that you'll just think that I'm, XYZ, but I'm calling this like, the rule of law for blah, blah, blah. And I just remember saying, because I was really close to where she was speaking, and I was just like, I looked up and I was, obviously I'm still crying down the fact that it passed, like, but I was just like, I believe you. He was like, that, like, I remember her saying, she's like, I know that y'all y'all won't believe that I love, like, LGBTQ people. Like, I know that you won't. I was just like, I believe that, and I did. And it just so happened later on, while we broke into like a break, and I kept on like, I was asking a friend, I was just like, have you seen her? Because I'm like, I wanted to talk with her.
Mm-hmm.
And she happened to cross my path. And I was just like, excuse me. And I ran to go and talk to her. I was just like, hey, like, I need you to know, like, you need to be in our church. Like, we believe you when you say that you love your church. Like, we need you here. And her, like, the way she looked at me, and she was just like, thank you. And she gave me the biggest hug. Like she truly needed it. Again, a very holy moment. Because at the end of the day, those who voted no on all three of those resolutions were the very, very small minority.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what it's like to be the one person in the room.
Yeah.
And regardless of what side you're on, it's not a fun side to be on. And this is probably one of the first times that they've been on that side.
Mm-hmm.
But like, it was those moments that do give me hope for the church, that just, if we can work towards conversation and building relationship and understanding where people are coming from, that we can move forward towards transforming the world around us, right?
Yeah. Wow. Shandon, I appreciate you sharing that particular part of the jurisdictional conference story, because and I appreciate what you said to this person, that we want you, we need you in our church. And we will have to do a lot of work. I think it's a lot of work.
A lot of work.
When we say and this is where some of us in the Centrist Progressive Coalition are not in agreement, but
right.
When we say we want a big tent,
yes.
When we say that we want you, like what you said earlier, I want to learn from people who don't see the world the way that I do.
Yes.
At some point, those people who don't see the world the way that we do don't vote with us in the conference, right?
Yes.
And therefore, that's the moment that, now, people can't see me with my air quotes. Now we are in the air quotes majority, possibly, at least in the US portion of the UMC. How we treat those in the minority, will be its own witness.
Yes.
And we know what it's like to be in the minority and to be treated a certain kind of way. And so now it will be, those of us who will walk into General Conference 2024, we've got to determine what kind of witness we want to bring, particularly to those who know they're in a minority on some of the issues that we're facing. So I really appreciate that part of the story, because that part of the story will get missed in the 3 Episcopal leaders elected in one ballot, and all of our resolutions passing with the majority. Mm-hmm. And you have this one person who says, I know that you won't believe me, that I love you. And we can talk about intent and impact. We can talk about that. What you say is love doesn't necessarily get experienced as love. But we do need to make some room for the genuine person who is on their journey.
Yes.
And trying and trying to stay at the table as much as we just want a seat at that same table. So that's Derek commentary. That's not what this podcast really is about. But
no, that's it. That is absolutely it.
I appreciate you bringing that part of the story. And so I know that some of the conversations that are happening right now are around what does it mean for, over 400 Texas congregations across these different conferences to be disaffiliating, and what that means for the jurisdiction, what that means for annual conferences. And I even saw a notification this week that there's an intentional effort. I don't know if this, if you're a part of this at all, but there's an intentional effort for, I think, Central Texas and another couple of conferences to actually be in conversation, possibly about some merging and stuff like that. What do you know about any of this that I'm talking about? Again, not my jurisdiction. And what do you know? Give us a little bit of the landscape around that particular piece of this.
Sure. I can tell you. So I'm on the boundaries committee for the South Central jurisdiction. And obviously disaffiliation is one of the biggest things that, that really impacts our potential boundaries. I think the biggest thing, because, obviously we have the ability to, redraw lines with the jurisdiction throughout the jurisdiction for different annual conferences. However, we have to kind of figure out how to balance, not only balance the disaffiliation, but also capitalize on the opportunity to really focus on mission, right? Yes, we have disaffiliations, but we also have people who are still here, and we still have the opportunity to really have our church planters step up and really lean into the different missions that maybe we weren't able to do before because we weren't as nimble, right? So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this, and there are some conversations about given we could only elect a certain amount of Episcopal leaders, we want to be able to set up our bishops for success, right? And not have them over like 10 different things, so like, how do you spread these out? But at least for the work, I think I can speak for those who are a part of the boundaries committee. We're really looking at what, because there was an actual report that was done before COVID of trying to look at boundaries in a more missional way. However, we had the pandemic. Pandemic changed everything. And so we me being the scientist that I am, I'm like, we really need to relook at what our demographics are, period, in our jurisdiction and in our different Episcopal areas, and see where the need is now, if there are new needs that need to be addressed, and how can we pool resources to be able to make this mission and be successful, right? Like, we have that opportunity when we have this upheaval to really take a look at that. Now, does that mean that we go and put a bomb to it and like be like, wait, let's go and draw new lines? I don't necessarily think so, but we're looking to see, like, are there natural affinities that we haven't necessarily looked at? This is an opportunity to look at some of those. Maybe there's some changes of cultural affinity that we haven't thought of, or hey, like, wouldn't it be nice if the Gulf Coast could share resources? Like, just like thinking about all the hurricanes and things that have come, like all the natural disasters that we've been having in our jurisdiction. Like, how do we more effectively look at that? Like, so there's a lot of different ways that you can try to make these puzzle parts fit.
Right.
But yeah, there are different. I'd say that there are different annual conferences that are looking at least at what a relationship could look like. None of them are necessarily set in stone from what I understand. But like, they're basically trying to gather all the information that they can to make the right decision.
I appreciate you sharing that. That's helpful. I think there's obviously going to be a lot of that technical work. And here's what's really cool is that you get to be a part of that technical work.
I'm so stoked. Like, this is my jam.
And how great that it is. I mean, I do wonder, Shandon, I know that because of our delays in General Conference, your sort of track towards ministry in the ordained space has been delayed. But I wonder as well, had you, this is all speculation, okay? So, but I just wonder, had you been clergy at this point or deep in the process, would we be able to leverage your scientific, technical expertise in the way that we are able to right now? And yes, possibly, but there is this thing that happens to clergy sometimes where we just limit y'all to the pulpit. and right, and then the lay folk have to come up like, I got an accounting degree, like at least I hope you're leveraging your accounting.
We are. We most definitely
but
are.
I just think and so that leads me to and again, we could do this all night. I think it's profound that you are a person, and you and I are close in age. We are people who are involved in the shaping of a church that we inherit.
Yes.
As opposed to shaping a church that we give, that we
along.
Yes. We are helping shape a church. You are literally on a team that is thinking about the boundaries of a conference that you will serve in.
Yes.
You got some runway ahead of you, like in Jesus' name, and so not to say that, grateful for those who have been General Conference delegates, 5 times, and those who've been serving in our congregations in many different ways, laity and clergy, for decades. Yes. And also the beautiful gift that it is that the future of the church is serving the church right now. I'm just curious, how does that land for you? Do you think about that often? Like, what are your thoughts on the future of the church leading right now?
Yes. So this is going to sound real selfish. But for me, like, this is part of the reason why I decided to run for General Conference. Knowing that I was going to serve this church, that I've been called to serve this church, I felt like we needed more contextual policies to be able to allow me, like myself, to be able to do the work that God has called me to do. Because in some senses I'm constrained by that. And yeah, it's true. Like, in doing this work, I'm very, very aware that having very constrictive legislation impacts the hands and feet on the ground in what we do. You may not see it necessarily, like our local churches may not necessarily feel it, especially those that might be more affluent, but they impact the everyday. And, if I'm able to use the gifts that God's given me in my past life, quote unquote, to kind of help shape that and, help follow into the call that God has for me, so be it. For me, God's really provided so much for me to be able to not be commissioned for it'll be 4 years. I have dreams for this church. When I first heard about the polity of the United Methodist Church, when I read the book of discipline, how many lay folk can they say that they read the book of discipline?
How many clergy folk can say they read the
book?
Keep going.
Say that too. But just being inspired by, so for example, the social principles that were going to be going up for 2020, that's the church I want to be a part of. I think of resolutions put forth by my Sisters of United Women in Faith of the Racial Justice Charter, for example. That's within our book of resolutions, that if we actually followed what it said, what kind of church would it be? As somebody who feels called to build and plant multi-ethnic churches in the full sense of the word, not just multiracial or multicultural, multi-ethnic and race, gender, whatever. I need the church to be able to create polity that allows for flexibility and for having room for the Spirit to allow it to breathe. We get bogged down in a lot of this, legalism. And I think that it is come to a time where we've lost the spirit piece of how God works, because we're looking to the letter on these different types of things. Our book of discipline should be a lot thinner, especially if we say that our annual conference are the basic unit of our church. We need to be able to have policy that will help uplift and empower them to do the work that God is calling them to do in whatever context that they're in, especially when we're looking at a global church. And so, working on the church that I plan on serving is it weighs heavily on my heart. It's the reason why I postponed my commissioning, to be honest, because it's important work. Because if I'm commissioned and I'm constricted in being able to do the work that I'm called to do, why am I even in the role, right?
Yeah.
So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shannon, what's your hope? What's your hope for the church?
My hope for the church is that we truly lean into our mission to create disciples, all types of disciples, in whatever context that they may be in, wherever they come from whoever they love, for the transformation of the world. To actually follow the wonderful resolutions that we already have in all of our annual conferences about racial inequity, of seeking to uproot oppression in whatever way that it presents itself, living into our baptismal vows, and to have that reawakening of the spirit so that we can really grow into something new and not be afraid of it.
Shandon Klein, you are a gift to the church.
Oh, you're sweet.
You really are.
You are too. Thank you so much for the honor of being on your podcast. You are doing some amazing things with this, and I'm a listener. Like it's so great. So yeah,
Well,
thank you for all you're doing.
We hope you enjoyed the episode. Bar of the Conference is produced by the team at Wesley's Revival, a ministry of Studio Wesley. Subscribe to this show on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or Google platforms so you don't miss a single episode. Thanks for joining us, and see you next time.